I have questions for you. Before I do that, I just want to call the elected officials and recognize them that are here tonight because we often get pulled in a lot of different directions, but we appreciate the fact they took time out of their evening to be here. So, in no particular order, I want to first of all recognize your councilman, Council President Joe Cavo, Councilman Mike Calandrino. They both very much have been interested in this issue and have been on the hotline with me just about every other day, so they are definitely in there swinging and battling for you, as the city is. We also have Councilman Phil Curran with us, Councilman Jim Johnson, Councilwoman Mary Teicholz in the back, Councilman Warren Levy, Councilwoman Jane Diggs, and I'm sure, did I miss anybody, Joe? No. I also want to thank Mike McLaughlin from my office that also has been working real hard on this issue, and Mike will appreciate all the good things that you do. I thought I'd first just give you an introduction of how we got here, just kind of as a reminder to everybody, because I know you got that phone call from me last week, and is that how everybody got the word out that there's a meeting? Okay, and the article and everything. And some people sort of called back and said, well, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. So I just want to take a quick second to kind of, I incidentally also want to recognize Kathy Molinaro from the school board. Sorry, Kathy. And Joey Urice from our planning commission over there. So I just want to kind of give you a brief overview about what's been going on. And then what we're going to do, once I've concluded with that, we're going to have Les Pinter, who works in our Corporation Counsel's office. Deputy Corporation Counsel does a great job for us, and he's going to kind of give you an overview of what the city is doing and what our position is. We also have Ron Grafe with us, our PE, who specializes as a radio frequency consulting engineer. Ron has been instrumental working with us on other ill-placed cell towers, even in this region, so he really kind of knows the area intimately well, unfortunately. And we'll talk a little bit about what he does. We're not going to discuss tonight his findings. Number one, he's still in the process of detailing his findings, but number two, we don't want to tip our hand to the Siting Council until we actually go to that public hearing on September the 9th. So he's got a lot of work to do. He may need some cooperation out of you. He may talk about that a little bit and explain a little bit about how he arrives at his conclusions. The cell tower in question, and anybody wants to jump in and cut me off or correct me, feel free. It's no problem. This is an open forum, kind of informal. Was planned and has been planned on the Colonial Hills Baptist Church. Is that right, Michael? Candlewood Baptist. Yeah, I always get the two mixed up. That's why I want to be sure about that. And basically what happened is about 3 or 4 years ago, it might have been not quite that long ago, there was an application that came in to put a tower there. We kind of, in the city, raised some eyebrows about it because we had just gotten done with the 252 Great Plain. That was the other one on the other side. And it was kind of like, here we go again. And these are draining battles. They're frustrating and they're difficult. And when we saw that, we got very concerned. We contacted the church. And the church said, look, we're going to put the application. We're not quite sure what we're going to do. The church then sold to another entity, another church. And in the process, the lease that was in place, or the agreement, was part of the property that transferred over. The church that's there now, again, Mike's been in contact with them pretty regularly, frankly is not too passionate about having the cell tower there. This is not, really something that they're concerned about. I mean, the revenue for them is nice, but it's not, they'd rather have harmony in the neighborhood than worry about some money for a cell tower. And so they were a little bit surprised too. And then what happened for about 3 years is things just got quiet. People started, Ron can speak to that a little bit. The business got quieter. People stopped citing these things. The demand quite wasn't there. But now we're seeing a resurgence of these applications, not just in your area, but throughout the city. We certainly support cell tower placement where it makes sense, industrial areas, business areas, things like that. And there's even some strategic locations that you can put them on. For example, Clapboard Ridge there's a church there that has one on there, but it's in the back of the building. It's not close to any houses. It's pretty inoffensive and covers that portion of the city. So in that sense, that really wasn't an issue. This to us and for the city and for my office is a little more problematic because it is in a very densely populated neighborhood that really is a neighborhood. It's all residential use with the exception of the churches, which are allowed by our special exception by our zoning regulations. So we don't think it's a good fit. It just doesn't make sense, and obviously we're opposed to it. But because the application slowed down and there wasn't a lot done with it, we didn't hear any more about it. We figured that the project had been abandoned once they saw that there was going to be a significant amount of resistance. But lo and behold, they fired up the application again, and they're moving forward. On September the 9th, at what time, Mike? There's 2 sessions.
3 to 5 is the technical, and 7 to 9 is public.
Okay, 3 to 5 is the technical. That is where they come and talk about the details and the specifications of the tower. So if you're interested, that's at Broadview Middle School, and you want to hear all that stuff, you can. But the big event is in the evening, the public participation, and that's really where we have to have you talk to your friends, neighbors, relatives, get folks out that night, because the Siting Council is impressed when we have numbers that are there that say this is a bad idea. That's important that you do that. So we're going to call you and remind you and harass you with some more crank phone calls to your house, and make sure that you know when it is, and we'd appreciate you coming. I think you can submit written testimony as well if you can't be there, and get that to our office. We'll submit a whole packet with all the neighborhood. If everybody writes in that, we'll put a packet that I'll submit to the Siting Council. I just want to, Ron's going to talk a little bit about what to say at the Siting Council and what those folks care about. But the Connecticut Siting Council has very broad legislative powers. They're very expansive. In fact, they trump local zoning. So if they say we want a power plant here, it doesn't matter what your zoning regulations say, they can locate it there. If they say want a cell tower here, doesn't matter what your regs say, they can locate it here. However, they do try to be responsive to the community as a whole, and that's why it's important that we go there. There's a couple of key points that they're concerned about, and I know that a lot of you have done some really good work on neighborhood property values, really strong research. That's good stuff for them. They like that kind of stuff. The medical side of this can be problematic. In fact, certainly, I'm not going to dismiss any medical studies that say there are issues, they aren't, but the history of the Siting Council has been that medical studies, they kind of just, it's not something we're concerned about. So if we're going to attack this, I'm not dismissing it, I'm not saying that it's not a problem, I'm just saying what they say, so don't shoot the messenger. So if we really want to attack this successfully, and I know Ron can kind of flesh this out for us, we want to look more at a couple things. One, is there an alternate location that sort of meets the community standard? And we have a couple that we're working on. We can't really discuss them, but a couple of thoughts that we had for them that we're going to share with them that night. And two, in terms of what they're concerned about would be the issue of property values and impact to the neighborhood. The aesthetics, how does it look? Does it make sense? Does it fit? Those are things that will make a difference to them. Alternate location and things like property values, monetary impacts, stuff like that. So when you frame your public participation work, try to focus in on those kinds of things. That's what they're more attuned to, and that's how they're more apt to base their decision. We're working on alternate locations. That's something we're doing internally to present to them. That doesn't mean that we have permission and we've got it all wrapped up in a bow and we say, hey, go plant your tower tomorrow. What we're saying to the Siting Council is, hey, there's alternatives to this that you might want to consider before you approve this in this particular area. In the meantime, we've also, besides hiring an engineer, we've also worked very hard at becoming what's called an interested party in the process. I'm going to ask Les Pinter from our office to come forward. He's going to talk a little bit about the legal aspects of all this, about what the city's doing, and also about what you can do in terms of this process. So, Les?
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor said, my name is Les Pinter, Deputy Corporation Counsel for the City of Danbury, and our office is charged with proceeding with examining legal issues of relevance to the city's interest, and derivatively to its citizens and other representative officials. I won't repeat much of what the Mayor said, and in the question and answer session there may be some additional opportunity to answer some questions, but largely the municipality's role in an application like this, according to the Connecticut Siting Council procedures, statutes, and regulations, the municipality is really known as a statutory party in interest. We're automatically notified. The city is automatically a party to the hearing process, so long as the city files a requisite letter of intent to be a party. A party in a case like this means one very powerful thing. that the city, any municipality that is a party, is able to provide testimony, including witnesses, relevant information, evidence, and other data at the time of and prior to and even subsequent to the public hearing process the mayor alluded to. The public hearing session, September 9th, is the date that was mentioned. The city of Danbury will be a party prior to and at that hearing, which means that we will be able to bring forward, in addition to our expert, other testimony, and we will be cross-examined, potentially cross-examined by the Connecticut Siting Council with respect to the issues that the city brings up. The city's evidence will include primarily environmental issues, and the reason that those are important is because the Connecticut Siting Council, whether it has to do with cell towers or other public communications and other facilities, is really interested in the question of whether the public need for a cell tower outweighs adverse environmental concerns. Those are the key and magic words in the Connecticut Siting Council's consideration. They care really less about anybody's interests except those two balancing acts, if you will, public need versus adverse environmental effects. So what the parties to this case have to bring forward is indications, evidence, testimony, witnesses with respect to environmental conditions primarily. The public, yourselves, are largely not parties to the case. You're public. You're welcome to provide public comment at the evening session that night. The municipality, the state, the federal government, other agencies such as that are the ones who will be parties to the case. They have more, the Connecticut Siting Council deems them to be more appropriate direct parties to the action. There have been some questions raised about, well, what happens subsequent to the public hearing process. Without going into too much technical information, the Connecticut Siting Council plans to close its hearing about 30 days after that, within which time briefs can be filed by parties to the case, and they have a certain amount of time, a certain period of time, usually 6 months, and possibly an additional 6 months in which to make their decision, the Connecticut Siting Council, that is. The Siting Council has broad jurisdiction in this area. They do hear everything. They do hear everybody. They want witnesses. They want expert testimony and public comment. Primarily, though, they will make their decision based on that dual balancing act that I mentioned to you before. So in addition to the mayor and experts and others who will be participating in that process, there could be other parties in interest as well. The Attorney General's office could be a party, and others who are by statute also automatically parties to the hearing process. In addition to that, the city of Danbury has, as the mayor indicated, inquired about alternatives, which can't be disclosed or discussed in any great length at this point, but those are things that are already before, or will be before, the Connecticut Siting Council as part of their consideration. So I think that's probably as brief but as comprehensive a summary as I can give you without providing too much detail, which at this point would probably be unnecessary. So Mayor, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Les. Les will be available once we conclude the formal remarks for questions and answers and things like that. Now I'm going to ask Ron to come forward, and I just want to say that he did a terrific job last time around. He is a real advocate for communities, and I'm certainly happy to have him on board, and the city's hired him specifically to oppose this project and to look at alternatives. So Ron, why don't you come forward and tell us a little bit about how you work?
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and members of the elected government, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Grafe. I'm a radio frequency consulting engineer. I deal with radio frequencies, things that make cell phones work, or radio stations or television stations, you name it. If it's radio frequency, Ron's been doing this for over 40 years now. And I've tried to expand my area to understand everything regarding radio frequency issues. I participated in tests of exposure to radio frequencies, where I was exposed to radio frequencies. In my career, I have worked around high power radio frequencies, so I've done the whole thing. I'm part of standard setting committees and part of the industry. I typically work for municipalities And mostly, because of the Siting Council, most of the municipalities I work for are either in New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, Vermont, Massachusetts. Connecticut's a little different because of the Siting Council. In most of those other states, local land use boards still have the authority and the ability to review applications, to make decisions on applications, and to decide if an application has merit so that they can proceed. And that's why they hire a consultant to help them do that. With the Siting Council, you're dealing with a bunch of people from Newington, who I think it's Newington, or West Hartford, who make decisions for us and decide what's good. And what they base their decisions on are the application that the carrier, and in this case, you know, it's interesting, it's a carrier, but it really is a site builder and provider. OptiSite builds and provides cellular communications towers and then rents them to carriers. And with all disclosure, I live in New Fairfield, and I helped OptiSite and the town of New Fairfield and the Girl Scout Council of Southwestern Connecticut in building a cell tower in my neighborhood on Bogus Hill. There's an example of our community thought it was an excellent idea because we felt that the impact of a cell tower in the Girl Scout land, 57 acres, was better than having a Sail Harbor 2 in Bogus Hill and all of the additional land use issues that would be there. So right now I've got, it's not in my backyard, but literally it's in my backyard, and we helped them do that and help the town of New Fairfield get revenue from this, the tax district of Bogus Hill get the tax basis for it, and improve the communications. So I'm not against cell towers, but what I am in favor of, the proper siting and the demonstration that a cell tower is indeed needed at the location that's been requested. When I worked for the city, I think it was 4 years ago, is when Sprint was proposing to put a cell tower in the similar peninsula. And it was different then because the Siting Council wasn't involved. They were only dealing with what were called cellular applications. They had not expanded their universe to what this is. This is called the PCS application, Personal Communication Service. They expanded their role, so now the Siting Council has taken over all wireless applications. It was somewhat easier 4 years ago because we worked with your planning commission, and through testimony, through counter testimony, I remember being here and asking their engineers, we could demonstrate that indeed there were alternatives and there were viable alternatives, and it was easier to convince a local board of elected officials or volunteer officials that indeed it was the wrong thing to do in that location. The road's going to be a little steeper here because the Siting Council has somewhat different views on what's needed, because they're going to look at this application and they're going to say, is there a need for PCS service in their area? And the applicant has shown, I have to tell you, that there is indeed, by what they gauge as their system requirements, a hole in the area. They've demonstrated that this site would fill that gap or fill that hole to provide them the coverage that they need. But rest assured, there are many flaws with this application. There are a number of issues that they have glossed over. They've dismissed sites. They have failed to analyze all the sites. They have failed to do an alternate height analysis, for example. And this is nothing new. We're not letting anything out of the bag there, but there are many issues that they have failed to do that they will have to, if we bring it up, come before the Siting Council to truly demonstrate the need for this site. And as part of this review, I mean, I know this area. I've been here for 27 years. And I know the area, I know where every tower is, I know where the towers are that you don't know where they are because they're stealth locations. And I'm aware of the coverage that might be needed and how it can be supplied. So I'm not against it, but I'm against something that isn't documented correctly and isn't the minimum necessary to provide the service and doesn't evaluate the alternatives. And trust me, there are alternatives. And that's what we're going to focus on, but we're not going to let all that out right now. That's part of this process as we develop where we're going to be in the application. So when the Siting Council does have their hearing, they're going to look to the need for service. They're going to look to why this particular site is especially suited for that service. And that's an area that you as a community then look to when you say, well, you may think it's especially cited for this service, but it's in our backyards, and you know, NIMBY, not in my backyard, but it has an impact on us because notwithstanding the balloon test that they did here, the photo simulations, you look at all that and you say, how is this going to be? That's what you can focus on in your comments. And how can this be, if you look at it and say, this is something that may happen, how can they stealth this? How can they ameliorate the impact on the community? Is there something they can do? Now, do you want a 140-foot conifer tree there? I'm not sure. In a deciduous forest, that may not look right. How about a cross sitting in the back of the church? Do you want that? I don't know. I'm just saying all the different things that you have to think about as possibilities just in case. But our goal is going to be to demonstrate that there is an alternative, or that there are alternatives that will serve the need of the carrier and also serve the need of the cell site building company who then collects the rents. So those are the issues. One thing I've read a couple of the letters in the paper, and I just have to say to you, please don't bring up the health and safety issues. It's a moot point. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 preempted all objections to health and safety issues associated with specific radio frequency proposals, as long as they were 30 feet above the ground and used a certain kind of frequencies with a certain power. No consideration could be given to the health effects because none were been demonstrated. And I will never support you or anyone else that there are issues with that because of my belief and involved in the community for such a long time. So don't say, if you would in your letters, oh, the health issues, and we don't know about this, because the problem there is the health issues in my backyard, I'm concerned about that. Put it in someone else's backyard and damn the health issues, let them suffer them. The issues are property values, the issues are view shed, the issues are environmental, runoff, something else. Concentrate on the issues that you can concentrate on. Don't confuse it, because you will be dismissed out of hand, and you will only make it that much harder to say there is an alternate site, because the people who have the alternate site will only say to you, well, how come if it's no good for you, why is it good for me? And being that there are alternate sites, there could be, I'm not saying there are, but there could be that same feeling in their community. So we have to run a very fine line there. So as we look at this and prepare the opposition and look at the application and what we have before us, there's going to be a lot of issues. And it would be fun to talk about them all tonight and tell you that, you know, we've got this solved. But I'm confident at this point, after reviewing this and my experience in doing this for hundreds of applications with municipalities, that we do have alternatives here. And hopefully the Siting Council will agree that the application is flawed and make them go back and go to another location.
Ron, real quick, you mentioned this is a carrier application versus, does that mean anything, or could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. When you look at this is the application that went before the Siting Council, and it says OptiSite T-Mobile. OptiSite is a cell site consolidator. They're a company whose job is to build cell sites. And once they build a cell site, they then rent it to different carriers. They take the revenue, the carrier puts its antennas on, and then these companies have cell sites that support 3, 4 carriers. That's why this particular monopole is designed for 4 carriers. If it just held T-Mobile, the co-applicant, they wouldn't make enough money to pay for the tower. It would not be financially viable for them. In their application, they show the needs of 2 carriers, T-Mobile and Sprint Nextel. Mayor Boughton had said something about that. Sprint Nextel, I found that fascinating because in all of the work that I do, they've got some financial problems. With Sprint buying Nextel, there's been an integration problem. They have literally exited the new site construction business. There's a half-hearted letter in here from Verizon Wireless saying, oh, we would be interested in going on there. There's been no demonstration that Verizon Wireless doesn't have excellent coverage there. And because of the frequencies that Verizon Wireless uses, their coverage is probably just fine there. But it's kind of a quid pro quo. Yeah, we'll help you. We'll give you support here if you help me out there. But we only have one applicant, real applicant here, and that's T-Mobile, but the true applicant. And everyone who signed these documents, there's no T-Mobile signatures in here. They're all done by OptiSite. That's troublesome to me too, but I can't do anything about that. In the municipalities that I typically work for, the applicant must be the carrier. The carrier, T-Mobile, Verizon, Nextel, Sprint, they must be the applicant. This co-application thing is something that happens in this situation we can't do too much about. Deutsche Telekom. T-Mobile is a subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom, a German company. No, there is no ownership. But I will point out that OptiSite was recently purchased by another company. Yes. But it wasn't Deutsche Telekom. The problem with that is that it has no impact on the need justification in the application. The need is the need of, whoops, I have lots of pictures. I've been working. The need of the that's justified in the application is of the carrier. You know, I just find it fascinating that it is someone else, but we really can't follow the paper trail there. There are other trails that we can follow and look at that things may not have been, the I's may not have been dotted and the T's may not have been crossed in parts of this application, and we still have to look at that. But basically, you have to say this: the application was accepted for filing, and so as far as the Siting Council is concerned, it's time now to review it. Okay, and I'll answer any other questions you have later when you're done.
Stay right up here, Ron. I'm sure we're gonna need you for a few minutes. I just want to welcome a couple other folks that joined us. Dwayne Perkins, member of our Common Council, Ben Chianese, member of our Common Council, and State Representative Joe Tabersack. So we thank them and welcome them as well. Also, just a reminder, please sign in so we can get out the word to you, and a reminder of when that meeting will be on the 9th. If you haven't done that, the sign-up sheet's right outside. With that, we're going to throw it open to some questions. Let's just remind everybody, we're all on the same team. The city is clearly adamantly opposed to the location of this cell tower in this neighborhood at this spot. I just want to be clear about that. And we're going to do everything we can when we go to the Siting Council to show that there are alternatives and to push them off this particular location. We are actively looking at a couple of sites that we think are a lot less intrusive and will have a minimal impact to anybody. It's not in anybody's neighborhood is what it comes down to. And so we're pretty pleased about that. We can't share them with you right now, but we'll be ready with all guns blazing on September 9th. So I just want to be clear about that. With that, does anybody have any questions or concerns? We'll start with Michael. I'm just going to work my way around. So, yep. And I'm going to repeat the question just so you can hear it. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor Boughton. Ron mentioned that at present, T-Mobile is the only partner that is actually going through with this arrangement, and there may be someone else. And earlier you said that if there was only one carrier involved, it wouldn't be a feasible program because it wouldn't be able to pay for the tower itself. Well, let's say Verizon or the carrier you mentioned pulls out of that. Is it very possible and that whole project would be scrapped to begin with?
That becomes an issue that clearly is only determined by the businessmen who run OptiSite or the other carriers. But the fact is, you know, and it's documented in here in my experience, it's going to cost them just south of $200,000 to build this monopole and to prepare the land so that it's a usable feature. If they have one carrier, typically the rent, and from experience, today experience, the carrier will be paying them anywhere between $1,800 and $2,200 a month, depending where they're on the pole. So if you look at $24,000 a year, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that no businessman is going to spend $200,000 today to get a cash flow of, not even a cash flow because it's pre-tax. And pre also, by the way, whatever penance they're paying the church for this, that to justify spending that much money, the rate of return. So they need 3 carriers to make the pole pay for itself. And that's why they talk about 3 carriers, and that's why the pole is designed for 4 carriers. And by the way, that's typically in our area. We only have Singular AT&T, Sprint Nextel, T-Mobile, and Verizon. There's a new carrier that's entered the market called Metro PCS, but they're building out in Lower Westchester and Manhattan right now, a different kind of carrier. Will they ever come up here? I don't know. If they do, it's going to be many years because of our population density and also our demographics. But you're right, if only one ultimately signs on for this, it's a tough deal for them to do. And that's my opinion. I have no financial connections with OptiSite or anything that I would know what their decisions might be.
Ron's big on disclaimers.
Absolutely.
At what point, Ron, in the protocol, do you find out whether or not they've got partners with them? At what point in this time protocol?
Well, in the application, and it's curious, there is typically a letter of intent. Now, they say that T-Mobile is the applicant, and if you look at the document, there is the work that was done. The first testimony is the Director of Development of OptiSite, and he does the testimony that states that we really need this and this is what we've done. Then we see some coverage maps that were allegedly done by T-Mobile that show their coverage, and then we see some coverage maps that were done by Sprint Nextel, but we don't know whether it was Sprint or Nextel. I mean, those are some of the issues and it's okay to talk about these because there's nothing secret here. And then there's a letter from Sandy Carter at Verizon saying, oh, if you get this, we'd be interested in talking to you about it.
But that's not a letter of intent.
It's just a letter of, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. We'll take a crack at it. And the only document they show as far as hard evidence is the front page of a master lease agreement between OptiSite and Sprint Nextel to use their sites. And as I said, it's only page 1. All the terms are redacted. There's nothing in it that tells us anything except that there is a master agreement between Nextel and OptiSite to rent sites. Nothing specific. So those are some of the issues that when I look to and I say, is this one of those vaporware applications? You know, if we build it, they will come. And that's hopefully, we can demonstrate that also.
Ma'am, you had your hand up.
My name is Mary Ann Stratler. I live on 1 Hawley Road. I'm within 1,000 feet of the proposed site. When will your report first be available for public review? Will it be on September 9th, and will the public have access to review that report? Since I don't have the funds available to retain a consultant, and you seem like a person that is, you know, good and expert in this area, will that report be available prior to September 9th or just on September 9th at that 3 p.m. session?
Quite frankly, I would feel comfortable in answering that with Corporation Counsel because that is clearly part of this, of how you jockey and position yourself for that. And the fact is that if I have done a report already, a draft report, if I had done one, they would have it in hand and would be looking at it and would be deciding how they're going to do that. And if there would be to another report that I would do a second one, if I were to do such a report, they would also have such a report, and they would be determining the timing of how that be filed. And maybe Les got a better answer on that.
From a strategic point, let me just say that the more we put out now, they read this stuff. OptiSite reads this stuff. They're very sophisticated, and they'll come loaded for bear. So the city's going to say this, we're going to make sure we cover this point in our presentation. So I don't mean to confuse you, but that's one of the reasons why we're trying to be, you know, as tight to the chest as we can. What we'd like to do, though, would be to get something out to everybody, so at least we're all on the same team when we talk to the setting council. And I think the issue will be alternative locations. And if you want, Mike, walk to my office, we'll draft some language sort of points, and then you can edit your own dialogue in that, so they're all sort of saying the same thing when we go there, and we're very united in terms of how we approach this. But specifics about that, we'll leave up to Ron that night, because I don't want to say, they're saying that hill over there, they'll run over there, do the test, and show up at the meeting, go, oh yeah, we looked at that, that's no good, sorry, you can't do that. So we want to make sure that we have as much doubt on their application on that evening in front of the full site. It's critical that we push it. So go follow up.
So when will that draft be available so that we provide uniform comments to the siding council at the PM session on September 9th? Because we'll be in sync with your report as long as you're proposing that you're against it, which I understand that. So that if we're all in sync as citizens, should we go to the 3 PM session?
Well, just let me answer that one directly first. Remember that the September 9th PM session is for the public, and that session, that hearing, if you will, is kind of termed "come as you are." It's really the public, neighbors, others, individuals who make general comments about why they're opposed to the project. The earlier session is where, if you will, you really have the meat of the issues. That's when the city and others who are parties, and I talked to you before about what a party was, that's when the parties provide evidence, another testimony. As far as draft documents, other things, without disclosing too much, draft documents generally are not disclosable, and they're not disclosable for a reason. That's because they're technically excluded, exempt by law, and secondly, they're drafts because you're still working on them, you want to prepare them appropriately. Finally, and technically, the Connecticut Siding Council's timeline is that, if you will, what they call pre-filed documents are due on September 2nd. That's when you have to list your evidence, you have to list your witnesses and other items that you plan to disclose on September 9th. So the September 2nd would be the earliest date at which any documents would be publicly available. And even then, there may be tactical reasons why those documents would not be disclosed in detail anyway until the 9th of September. So drafts between now and September 2nd would probably not be available.
I think we can get you some generic stuff that you can expand on. Just so again, we're all sort of saying the same thing without giving away the heavy details that we're going to bring in technically.
How will you get it to us?
We got your email out there. We can email everything as long as you promise that we'll call out the site and tell them what we're saying.
No. And
No, we've got emails out there. We can do that. We'll also prepare some stuff in my office, and we'll go around the calls and you can come pick it up if people don't have access to it.
And by the way, I did look in the audience, unless someone is here that I don't know, because I've seen them so many times. I looked for the attorneys for OptiSite, I looked for the principals of OptiSite. They don't appear to be here tonight, so, but there's no reason why they can't discover what we talked about, but they're not here.
so has Connecticut precedent been set already that proposed, no, I mean, are there other 140-foot cell phone towers within 1,000 feet of highly residential property that
Well,
already exist under the Connecticut
I
Siding Council?
have to go for full disclosure again. As I told you, I'm not against cell towers. I think they're a necessity if they're in the right location. I live in New Fairfield, and for years, well, for 2 years, it seemed like 10, I was a selectman in New Fairfield. And in that time, a private operator came to the town and said, we want to build a cell tower in New Fairfield, and we're going to put it on someone's private property. And my answer was, fie on you. We'll build it on municipal property, and we'll get all the rent. And as a result of that, New Fairfield had a referendum, and we approved 170-foot monopole built behind our police station right next to a residential area and to our schools. And the people were delighted with it because we didn't have cell phone service. The tower... Yeah, it stopped. The tower paid for itself in a year and a half, and right now the town gets over $100,000 a year in revenue that it uses to buy fire trucks or pay down our crazy debt. So there are areas where it's been done. Am I proud of that? Well, I'm proud of the fact that New Fairfield got the money as part to, the people in town ultimately thought it was a great idea. There was objections at first, but in this particular location, the visibility of the monopole was not from any residences 1,000 feet away. It was totally shielded by the natural vegetation and the hill line. The only place you can really see the monopole is from the center of town, and no one seemed to worry about that. But indeed, many times it's been done.
There are, the hospital is coded with cell phones. And it's there's other high points throughout the city, very much residential areas that are covered. I think the issue really for us is the environmental issues, the height of the pole in this neighborhood,
Mhm.
not the hill, will look absurd. And that's
And I think that's critical, the height of the pole.
I'll give it up in a second, but
Sure.
140 feet on that street. I understand that the Connecticut Siding Council probably can disagree with your zoning requirements, but if the Connecticut Siding Council wasn't there, just for a minute, would you allow under Danbury City zoning requirements a 140-foot structure that close? I walked the property the other day. It's right on, I think it's 14 Indian Spring Roads. It's right on the back of his property, and it's right on the back of the other the Baptist church property. If the Connecticut Siding Council was not there, would that 140-foot structure be allowed under the Danbury City zoning requirements? When that thing falls, okay, if it falls and it falls in half, it's still going to fall in his pool.
We're with you.
Well, there's please, another aspect of this that you're just going to be expending energy to talk about, well, what if the monopole falls over and it's going to fall in someone's pool or on someone's property? Monopoles or towers are designed for one thing, and that's to stand up and withstand all of the energy that can be placed upon them. There are so few failures of monopoles and typically, or towers, and typically when they fail it's because somebody ran into it or somebody did something terrible. But as far as a windstorm or rainstorm, you name it, those are the only things that are typically left standing. So that's an issue you can try to talk about, but once again, they're going to say, oh yeah, that's nice, thank you very much, next. So concentrate on the issues, and I challenge you to do this when you talk about the height, the 140 feet, which is critical because, as I pointed out, we're still looking at that. Why 140 feet? I don't know where, well, I know where all of you live, but where you drive around. For example, if you ever get off 84 at exit 5 and then go over Golden Hill Road down to Padnaram Road, there's a big place there that makes septic tanks. Do you know where that place is? Okay, well, when you're at the top of Golden Hill Road, just before you make the right to go down, I want you to look at between noon and 1 o'clock. And in the trees, you will see a wood laminated. It's made out of laminated wood, monopole that holds up T-Mobile. And that's right next to a condominium. They don't even know it's there. And the antennas are shielded in the trees so that no one has any idea that it's there. It's so difficult to see. In the wintertime when the leaves are off, you can get a better handle on it. But right now, I challenge you to find it. So there are stealthing capabilities that if all else fails, and we have to think about that. You have to think about what's our backup position. There are stealthing opportunities. There are ways to stealth a monopole to minimize its impact on the community. And that becomes beauty is in the eye of the beholders. You know, what is attractive to a community? Some communities love monopines. They love trees that look like pine trees. And I'm not talking about the bottle brush that's on the Hudson River Parkway. No. That's the most embarrassing thing. The most embarrassing thing. Go up to Sherman as you're 39 coming over the top of the hill. If you look down, just before you come down 39, you'll see a monopine in there in New Milford. And I always say to my wife, is there a cell tower around here? Oh no, it's only a pine tree. But of course it's sticking up 150 feet into deciduous forest of 70-foot trees, so you say, well, I know what that is. But those people found that attractive. As I said, here's a website for you, Stealth Site, StealthSite.com. I have no affiliation with them. They stealth monopoles, towers, buildings, you name it. And if you go to their website, you can see some of the unique systems they've come up with to try to conceal towers or monopoles. StealthSite.com. That's just one of them. There are many of them. Or if you just Google stealth cell towers, and you're going to get a whole list of these companies that do that. They'll do building stealth locations, like on the Danbury Hilton Garden Inn over by Exit 1. That hotel that's on the right side of the road as you're going west, there's a cell site there. It's done as an elevator penthouse on top of the roof. Exit 5, the Scalzo, I call it the Scalzo building, that 4-story building that's right there. There's a cell site on that. I mean, they're everywhere. and that's because of good stealthing. It's tougher to stealth a monopole, though, in the middle of a churchyard, but maybe it's across. You know, but once again, that's the beauty in the eye of beholders, and I only mention that to you that there are alternatives. Now, in their drawings, by the way, they show just a terrible representation of what this thing is going to look like when it's done. And my fear there is that what they show isn't what it ultimately looks like, because the monopole itself is a steel structure that's 6 to 8 feet at the base, and it tapers to 2 feet at the top. So it's a narrow silhouette. But then they hang a 12-foot platform, 3-sided platform, 12 feet on a side at the top of it, and then they hang antennas on that. So what you see then is a lollipop. Now, the way to do that is to disguise the antennas, put them inside a sheath, mount them close, drive down Route 7 behind Bob Wilton, or no, that BMW place. There's a flagpole there. That's a cell site. There are ways to shield it. Would a 170-foot flagpole look, or 140-foot flagpole? Take one big flag to do that. But if it were 100 feet, would a flagpole work? Once again, that's where you guys have to think about the community. And I don't want you to think that this is lost. It's not lost. We've just begun. But in the same point, think about the alternatives, and then you can use that argument before the siting council and say, I don't care how you disguise it. The impact to our neighborhood from a visibility point of view and property value, if you have a property value guy, is incredible. That's all you can really talk about. But in the background, remember all those things of, well, we'll do this, we'll do that, and just say, it's not going to look good. And if you're unified on that, that all of you agree that none of those alternatives make sense to the community, how can they approve it? I don't know. We'll see.
Sir, you had your hand up.
My name is Harold Dunnan. I live on Great Plain Road. I've got a two-part question. Part of it's for the city, Mr. Mayor, and part of it is for you, Ron. If we get stuck with this tower, and this is on church property is not taxed, will that entire parcel not go into spot zoning for that acre or whatever that thing's going to be on? Will the entire parcel that church is on now be taxed as industrial property or whatever business rating that would be at? The other thing is, there's a cell tower that I asked the councilman about just before a council meeting one night and still haven't gotten an answer. Is the tower that is in the sign behind Howard Johnson's a Sprint tower, and does T-Mobile, and does T-Mobile and AT&T both use the same radio frequencies, so if they're sharing towers?
Which order would you like the questions answered in?
Either one.
Okay. Well, just to help you out on the first one, from New Fairfield's point of view, when we went on the Girl Scouts, which is tax-free, as soon as they took their 100 by 100 compound and built their monopole, I literally went up there with the assessor and I said, let's get them.
All 57 acres?
No, just the cell site and the real property that was there. The Girl Scouts are still tax exempt, but our assessor, and I don't know how it's going to be done in Danbury, but our assessor carved it out, and we now collect tax, and our taxes.
The same way we routinely will split nonprofit entities who have a for-profit center, and we'll do a valuation on the for-profit issues, and we'll tax them accordingly. We'll also tax them on the leases. As part of the valuation of that particular facility, it's not only just the real metal, steel, the wires, and antennas, it's also the value of the leases going forward. They have to provide proof to that, or we have an exorbitantly high number. So,
The goodwill of the leases, yeah.
Is that a T-Mobile tower and that sign behind
Okay,
the Barnaby's
now let's go to that
restaurant
sign.
with AT&T?
And by the way, they did, to their credit, for what it's worth, identify that site. That's the one that's across from the Danbury Harley-Davidson place. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, directly across,
Right.
where the sign's falling
Right, where the
apart,
sign
and
is
put
falling
everything
apart.
back together
Yeah.
again.
That's a T-Mobile site, the site where the antennas were built inside the sign and then it fell down. They're still there. They have identified that. It's a 60-foot site.
And that's within 1,000 feet of the other one they want to build?
Oh, no, it's way across. It's probably 3/4 to a mile away. Yeah. And
What's
it
the
provides
normal spacing on a tower?
Its purpose was to provide just some coverage along 84 right there. And your question about the frequencies. AT&T operates two systems. They operate a cellular system. That's the original system. That's the one that operates at 800 megahertz. And then they also operate a PCS system that operates at the 1950 megahertz band. T-Mobile only operates a system at 1950 megahertz. Those are the more challenged frequencies. It is those sites that those systems that require more sites because the radio waves don't travel as far. So there'll be
What's the
fewer cell
spacing
sites.
between the towers?
Today in the greater Danbury area, the cell site systems are about 1.5 miles to 2 miles apart for a good seamless coverage. In the case of New Fairfield to Danbury Hospital, which is the closest site, we're talking about 4 miles. And as you come down Pad Naran by the prison, if you ever try to do that, you'll see that the call probably fails. A PCS system is going to have sites between 3/4 of a mile and 1.25 miles separated because the frequencies are so less robust and don't go quite as far.
Okay, sir. And I know, Joe, I got you. You're coming up.
Hi, my name is Bob Richards. I live at 1 Royal Pine Drive. I'm about 2 blocks from the church. My wife and I just started to go to church there. We're not members yet. I just have a couple of questions here, especially about OptiSite. You mentioned that there's only one cell company, cell carrier that's interested so far. OptiSite also, I understand, can rent space to other than cell phone companies. Is that correct?
Sure. Anyone that uses radio frequency energy, it could be someone providing Wi-Fi Max. You've heard about that new way of internet communication. It could be Wi-Fi Max. And typically, OptiSite will always say in an application, and we will make the top of our pole available to any municipal services. In other words, the police or fire department. If they wanted to rent it to a paging company or the beeper people, the few of them that are left, they could do that. Basically, it's an apartment house, and whoever goes into the apartment, you know, whether it's a cellular carrier, PCS carrier, whoever it is, they'll rent them space.
How about private organizations? The U.S. government or something like that?
Oh, sure. Anyone who...
There's any kind of frequencies they want.
Anyone who uses radio frequencies that has a hole in their coverage that any particular site would service could indeed rent space and operate from there. And by the way, their application, and this is the curious thing once again about their application, but it's part of the application. You know, they have to do this health and safety study, which is to demonstrate that they're in compliance with the Federal Communications Bulletin OET 65 on exposure to radio frequency energy. It's only done for T-Mobile. It's not done for 4 carriers. And that just further supports that this really is an application just for one carrier. The Sprint Nextel thing is cute, but or the Verizon thing is cute, but they're really not part of the application.
The application itself, has anyone compared it to the first application when the other church had the contract? You also had a meeting about that, and it was tabled, and nothing was ever done. Is that correct? There was no application?
There was a lease signed, but there was no application.
There was some kind of a meeting because there was minutes of it. In fact, I found the minutes and I sent it to a proposal. June 30th, right? After school was out, and that means July 1st, August, September 1st. Only gives us 2 months before this siting council meets. It sounds kind of funny that they would do something like this.
Right, and they pulled back and they weren't going forward at that time, and then it popped right back up on the radar at the end of June. So, well, we're going forward with this.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Ron. I don't know whether this is going to be a brave or stupid statement, but I'm a T-Mobile customer. But But I'll tell you why. One of the primary reasons I've been a T-Mobile customer, and I've been a T-Mobile customer for years, was when I was researching cellular companies years ago. T-Mobile was one of the only companies that was touting that one of the things that they tried to do in most areas was to build small antennas, conceal them, hide them in church steeples, put them on tops of telephone poles, make them very unobtrusive to the public, and it cost them more because what they had to do is they had to put them closer together to get the coverage area. My question to you is, are they still sensitive that way, or is it because OptiSite is proposing this, they're going to jump on this? I mean, could one of the things that we could propose at the Siting Council that night is to ask T-Mobile to research that and go back to multiple smaller antennas, hide them in church steeples, put them on top of a telephone pole or something in that nature, and ask them to do something like that to be more community sensitive?
I always thought you were a subscriber to T-Mobile because of Catherine Zeta-Jones when she was, I knew it, who they don't use anymore. That's quite frankly, if you read the application, it's part of the party line. We always like to build on existing sites. We'll always look to an existing site, and because it's cheaper. We don't have to go through all this zoning nonsense. We don't have to go through building something. We just put some equipment racks on top of a building or somewhere. That's part of the line. And in general, I think in a broad category, any cell carrier or PCS carrier would rather build on an existing site than would on a raw land or a new site, because it's easier. In a situation like this, in that immediate area, I mean, the only alternative you might have would be if that church had a big steeple and a bell tower or something that they could say, well, we'll go inside that, which happens many times. In the perfect example, it's beautiful across the street. One of the best installations I've ever seen. That is priceless. You would never know that that bell tower holds cellular and PCS antennas. It's a tremendous job, but it costs them an arm and a leg, but the city of Danbury said, you're going to do it that way. That was before the Siting Council. So they would rather do that. Here, it's more difficult. Now, are there alternatives? Yeah, there's something that's beginning today, and if you want to research this too and become dangerous, it's called Distributed Antenna Systems, DAS, where indeed they cover an area with many small microcells on telephone poles or something else that's not very tall to try to achieve the same coverage that they would get from one big site. The problem with doing DAS here, honestly, is the terrain, the tree cover, the way the road's wide around, and the fact they're also proposing coverage of Lake Candlewood, and you can't do a DAS in the lake because there's no place to hang it. The downside to a DAS, as I was saying to Mike the other day, and I know it's an issue that's come up in the community. If you've seen these AT&T boxes that are going on the telephone poles now to do their U-verse, these big gray boxes that stand about 5 feet tall and are 3 feet wide, that's what you would have wherever there was a microcell, wherever there was a DAS site, you'd have one of those at the base of the pole. So it's a trade-off. Which would you rather have? DAS is a possibility, but they will fight that tooth and nail. And quite frankly, it's really tough to justify when you can say all we need is one site. And especially when we say, yeah, and there's another site over here that works really well. That's truly the goal. But you brought up something that I forgot, and I'm glad you did. Famous case, Hohokus, New Jersey. Heard before Donald Trump's sister. She was the judge. And it was interesting because the carrier said, we don't have coverage, we need this cell site. Well, the community all got T-Mobile phones and drove around and submitted all of their drive tests, even though it clearly is not, it doesn't stand the test of a technical drive test, and demonstrated that there was good coverage. So if you do have T-Mobile and you can drive around this area that's part of the gap, or any of you that do have T-Mobile, and drive around and say, hey, works fine, I can make the call in my house, what are they talking about? Because that is indeed one of the issues that no matter what application is brought up, we've seen an application, but we haven't seen in any of these applications concrete evidence demonstrating that the gap that you say is there is really there. And there's nothing like real world, I made the call from there, and give it a try. That is something that will fall on a better ear than, oh, I'm worried about the health effect. That goes nowhere. I do have coverage, so do my neighbors. That does work better.
Yes. I already got it. What Ron's going to do is pull a lot of that together. So if you have some stuff that you want Ron to look at, I'm sure you can get it to us and we'll get it to him and let him put his practiced eye on it and be able to put that in context with the application. Well, here's what we'll do. At the night of the hearing, I'll put out my phone. You guys go stand up at the site and call me. And we'll demonstrate that we have plenty of coverage because somebody's on a T-Mobile phone right now calling me. So, of course, it's a good idea. It's what you pay me for. Good ideas. Okay, all the way in the back. Yes. Yep. In fact, Joe, you're on T-Mobile, right? Why don't you we'll do that. Don't film that. Get that out of here. It's all right.
Thank you. My name is Charles Snodgrass, and I live directly behind where they're going to put, or where they're directly behind my property where they're going to put the cell tower. My question is, I don't know who really I could ask this question to, because most of the people here are, I would consider middle class. You want to sell your house, your home, when you get to a certain age, say for $400,000 or $500,000, but if they see a cell tower, that will bring it down to maybe $300,000 or $200,000. Now, the way I look at it is you're going to have there's a lot of fat cats are making money on this. One guy went out of this place when they first came with the cell tower, and he jumped out. He was thrilled. He looked at me and he said, "I'm making, I forget what it is. Every month I get a paycheck from them." But what I'm saying is, if we sell our home, what about the cell OptiSite compensating us for, say, you want to sell for $500,000, they got to make up that $100,000. They're making money every month. And you're talking to middle class, and right now you could take from the governments of the cities in Connecticut or Danbury, right down to Washington, D.C. These fat cats are putting money in their pocket. Of course, they do go to jail if they get caught. But hey, let's face it, they're making money. I don't know who to talk to, a real estate agent or somebody from the city of government.
No, that's a good question, Mr. Snodgrass. One of the things maybe we can do, and Mike, I don't know if you're working on this, I know some of the residents have done a lot of good work on property value impact already. And I know that there are people that we probably could engage to at least do a study on this area. Mike and I will look at that in the morning to find somebody that maybe can write a report as to what the impact of the property values will be should the tower go up. And maybe we'll search around starting tomorrow, try to get somebody to have that ready for us. And then
Could that be put into the OptiSite concept?
it will.
September 9th?
Oh yeah, we plan on presenting that to them. As this is, if you let this tower be sited here, here's the financial impact to the neighborhoods and homes that surround the site. I'm sure we can find somebody that can draft some kind of report for us. I know some of the neighbors have already done a lot of really good work on that, but maybe we can bring in a professional.
You never mentioned that all through.
Yeah.
You're talking about the other things that AT&T and all these
Yeah.
green boxes, that's going to be,
And that's-
TV.
And that's a,
I mean, they're making money, the middle class, hey,
Yeah.
you're getting stabbed.
and that's a compelling argument to the siting council that people are going to have economic harm if this tower goes in this location. There's people that are going to lose property value. That's something that they'll be interested to hear. Les, I think we'll have to search around and see if we can get either one of our appraisers or I'm not thinking of who's out there can do that for us. Maybe there's people that specialize in that, but that's a good point. We hadn't done it to this point because I knew that there were some neighbors in the area that have some expertise in this area that were working on it, but perhaps we ought to look at bringing on an expert on board just to quantify that number for us. It shouldn't be too difficult to do. So that's good, very good suggestion. So, yes.
Hi, I'm Sadie Virtudes. I live on Palmer Road in Danbury. I'm a realtor in Danbury, and I've sold property here for 23 years. And I can tell you that I've had people in my car who have seen high tension wires or cell phone towers who have said, I don't want to see that house, even after I've made an appointment. They just don't want to go in it. Close, 1,000 feet, even 500 feet away. If they can see it, they don't want it. If it's visible, they don't want it. And it's embarrassing because you've made an appointment with someone and you have to call them up and say they don't want to come into the house.
So you write a letter to the siting council?
I already have. I already have written them a letter. I have an answer from them saying they'll take my information into advisement. I wrote it 2 years ago. I'll get the address and I'll write it again, but it is a real reality.
Or if you want, you just get it to us, we'll submit it when we submit our package.
Okay.
September 2nd, we'll need everything, any kind of written testimony September 2nd. Okay. Well, we'll do that for you. We'll take, yeah. I'll have the staff, yes, moving like busy bees. But we'd like to have it about a week in advance, just so we can collate it, put it together in some kind of coherent package. I don't want to throw to the siting council just a bunch of documents, say, here you go. I want to be able to maybe get them a binder or get it bound so that everybody's got it. Here's the reaction from the neighborhood folks of this proposed application. So your letter would be very helpful, both anecdotally and also being a neighbor. So you're uniquely positioned to be able to make that argument. And then we'll also, Ron will have a lot of technical stuff. And Ron, the question I have for you related to the technical side, that early session, the 3 to 5 session, they'll present their plans to the siting council. Does OptiSite do that? And then will you have a chance to refute them?
You know, that's the interesting question. The last time I worked in Connecticut for objectors was in Wilton for a group called Wilet, who were opposing the expansion of an existing tower in Wilton that had been there for years and years and years, and everyone was comfortable with it. And OptiSite came in and wanted to make it taller, make it fatter, make it wider, and add lots of antennas. And that's what we really have to get worked out here, because I did my reports and I submitted my reports. At the general meeting we had that night, basically all of the testimony was by the applicant saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and then the siting council said, well, okay, well, we'll listen to comments. Then when they actually had the hearing in I always say Newington, wherever they're, I think it's Newington, isn't it? Is that where they're headquartered? When they have their official hearing, we had to have everything pre-filed so that any testimony that I gave that day had already had kind of been in the record. Like if I wanted to talk about coverage, I would have had to have said something in my report about coverage and say the coverage is defective, so then I could expound upon that. But if I hadn't pre-filed it, they said, sorry, you can't talk about that. It really is an unlevel field that they get to see our cards before we sit down to the table. And even though we've seen their cards now, they set up the table. So it's a little difficult. But one thing about that meeting, I count about 75 of you here tonight. That's my guess. Typically when I go to these hearings in municipalities, the first night, there's 30 people, 35 people, gung-ho. The next meeting, there's 15 people. And the last meeting, when the approval's done, there are 3 people. One of the most important things that you can do as a community is demonstrate your joint opposition to this. And yeah, I know it's a nighttime meeting, I'm not getting paid for this, and God, I got something to do. Your presence there is one of the strongest convincers to this governmental organization that's running the table here, that you guys are sticking together and want to object to this. And I know it'll be difficult, but if there are many of you here as there are tonight, they don't take that lightly. Forgetting all the other evidence, they say, wow, there are a lot of people here. And keep that up, whatever you do.
Yeah, I just want to say it's a little nebulous, so we're going to have to make sure that we understand that process thoroughly. They do, I'm not going to say the siting counselor changes the rules, but they do from time to time change their procedures. And so, you know, I've been to these things where you show up and they say, well, we're not doing that this time. And I said, but that's not what you told me 2 days ago on the phone. So we'll have to nail all this down clearly and concisely for the technical side and then for the public participation side. Les, if you want to just mention.
Just quickly, Mayor, in direct response to your question, that statutorily, both the applicant and the party gets a chance to speak and provide testimony at the 3 o'clock session on September 9th. As Ron indicated, most of that will be pre-filed. The Citing Council doesn't really want to be surprised. They want to know what exhibits are coming in. They want to know what testimony is being provided. They want to know the names of the people who will be providing testimony and speaking at that session. Both parties. Remember, the applicant has already gotten a lot of their stuff in. The party will have its pre-filed exhibits September 2nd, and then the Citing Council will expect both parties to speak to what they've submitted. So, in short, that's kind of the way it works, kind of like a trial. Both parties will get a chance to provide the testimony that they've already mostly indicated in advance. They'll be able to provide that at that session at 3 o'clock.
The evening session is just straight public hearing.
Yeah, again, it's important to distinguish, right? The public hearing session is just that. It's people at 7 o'clock coming out to express their personal concerns, whereas the parties, again, statutory parties will have technically done the, if you'll excuse the term, and this is the process the Citing Council sets up. The heavy lifting will be done on an evidentiary basis earlier that day.
I'm going to work my way in the back, but go ahead. Go ahead.
The Connecticut Citing Council has a series of questions for OptiSite, and the responses will be back from OptiSite by tomorrow. Connecticut Citing Council had a list of questions for OptiSite, and the responses were due back from OptiSite tomorrow. Is that going to be part of your consultant report, where you're going to review all those responses of all the questions that the Connecticut Citing Council had directly to OptiSite? It must have been over 20 questions, I think. Are all those responses, are you going to be reviewing those as part of your report?
Quite frankly, all that I've been given so far is the original application. I did see some... Oh, okay.
I clicked on docket 366, and I clicked and printed all the documents attached to that docket 366, including a July letter of Connecticut Citing Council questions directly made on, right? Is that correct? Directly made from?
A list of questions they had to OptiSite,
Right.
and then a list of questions they had to T-Mobile. So they actually had two lists of questions.
Then I certainly will review those in the docket at the csc.gov.
How is this site approached? I mean, does OptiSite just, go ringing doorbells on Stadley Rough Road?
Oftentimes, yeah. They do.
Well, quite frankly, typically what happens here, the carrier sets up something called a search ring, where they've determined that there's a gap in coverage. So they set up a search ring, which is typically a circle, a radius of about half a mile, quarter mile each side of center. And they send out real estate acquisition specialists to look around. They go and check the titles. They see who owns what. And if you look in the application, they will show all their, we went to this site, but it was already sold. We went to this site, they weren't interested. That's how they do it. To me, that's a throwaway question that the Citing Council asks. The real meat of the questions are the ones that are seriously technical and justifying it. And to answer your question, yes, I will have comments on all of those questions. And had I done a draft report, you might see the same kind of questions.
Somebody had their hand up over here, and I know Warren's, I'm working my way back.
Hi, we live on 92 Stadley Rough, which is very close to the church, and we live in the back, woods, beautiful. What impact does the cell tower and the frequencies have on the environment, on the wetlands, on the animals?
I assume you mean from a health and safety issue, or the health issues, or the environmental issues. Okay.
Not health for us.
Yeah, no, but for anything. Radio frequency energy is a form of electromagnetic energy that's just like light, but a different set of frequencies. It propagates like light in a straight line. it has the same effect on the environment as light does. In the case of light, our receptors in our eyes are able to detect the photons that are in light. In radio frequency energy, the frequencies are such that our detectors don't work for that, but there are other devices in the cell phones that work for that. The impact on the environment is the same as light. You go out on a warm, sunny day, and you feel warm because there's all that energy on you, all that energy on the ground. The similar situation for radio frequency energy, if there's enough of it, i.e. inside a microwave oven, when you put something in the microwave oven, it feels warm. That pizza warms up. It's the same impact, but the beauty and the similarity to light, as soon as you leave the sunlight and go back in the house, you don't feel warm anymore. Whatever basal temperature you raised by goes down. As soon as you take the pizza out of the microwave oven, it gets cold again. There's no residual effect. There's no impact on water. There's no impact on soil. And many times applicants will put an application on top of a water tank, and the people always ask, what does this do to the water? Well, it doesn't do anything to the water because the water's inside a sealed cylinder, and by definition, radio waves can't go inside the steel cylinder, so the water's absolutely safe. But even if it did leak in there, the only thing it could possibly do would be to raise the temperature of the water by 1/zillionth of a degree, if that were the case. But as far as your environment, in fact, many times, one of the things that I also do, and in fact did a number of them down in Yonkers last week, they'll put cell antennas on top of a building. And think about that. You're in you paid all this money to be in a condominium, and you found out that your board of directors decided to put cell antennas on it. So the residents will say, well, we'd like to know what impact this is on us. So we'll do a set of before and after measurements, and I'll go to the site before anything's turned on, and I have the equipment, relatively very sophisticated technical equipment to measure these frequencies and the impact. And I'll make a set of measurements, then they'll turn the cell sites on, and I'll make another set of measurements, and typically it's very, very difficult to see any difference in what's existing now and what is a result of this. So the impact, the big impact of a cell tower is visual, because you can see it. Anything else is only a perception that you might have. So that's the one area and that's the area that's going to, if you believe there's a property value impact, it's the perception, the real estate lady. It's the perception of seeing this thing, and I don't want it here because I don't want to look at it. And there's that's perfectly justified, and you should feel totally comfortable in expressing that, because that is the true impact on you. You're going to see something that you didn't see the day before yesterday.
Hi, I'm Mark Vitarelli from 13 Monarch Road. I have a question for Ron. The meeting on the 3rd, is it 3rd, 5th, 9th? Okay, getting tired now. From 3 to 5, the technical session, can the public come and observe? Not say anything, but just sit in. Okay.
Absolutely. It's a public meeting. They typically don't allow public comment at that. They wait until the evening session. But you can see everything that's stated, make your notes about anything that you're uncomfortable about, and then when it's your turn, after they have dinner, that's when you bring it all up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Warren Levy. I'm on the Common Council. I've seen over a period of years these cell towers crop up within the community, along with the ugly looking boxes that the telephone company installs on the lower section. Somewhere along the line, they mandated that they at least have 4 other companies locate on an individual tower. And I was wondering, they all say they're not compatible. So you wind up with one antenna that's 80 foot and another one that's 140. And looking over the siting council on the web, they have them up to 200 feet high. I just wonder, who's the burden of proof on that there is truly a need that they can't participate on an existing cell tower in the area? Is it the burden of proof for them to convince the siting council, or is it up to the neighbors and everybody else, the community, to say it's not any good?
Pretty good question. The burden is theirs. They have to demonstrate that 140 feet, actually the center of radiation of T-Mobile is 136 feet because their antennas stick a little bit above and a little bit down. They have to demonstrate that that's the minimum height necessary. In Wilton, for example, they drive me crazy. They insist that the antennas be separated by 10 feet. That if you have one set of antennas at 136 feet, that I can't put my next set of antennas till 126 feet. And then the next one's at 116 and then down to 96, I guess that is. And, you know, I just deal with the facts. So I point out to them that I can show them many, many, many locations where antennas are located closer than 10 feet. I can show them papers done by guys a lot smarter than me at antenna companies that say, hey, there's no problem. You know, make them as close as you want to because there's no interaction between the antennas. And that's one of the things that always takes air out of their sails because remember, these guys are building a pole to hold 4 carriers and they're figuring it's 10-foot separation. That's why they need 140 feet. You know, if you look at this closely, they might only need 100 feet. But they're figuring if they're going to get those 3 more guys on there, they're going to need, because you can't have a guy at 30 feet, 40 feet. You know what? Even I will say it doesn't work there. But there is one of the issues that they have to prove, and that's one of the things that we have to bring up. Also today, antenna technologies have changed, and I love to talk about things like this or to bring that up. And you know, we can put 2 into 1 antenna. So why do I have to have 2 sets of antennas when I can put 2 into 1 antenna? It happens in broadcasting business all the time. It happens. This is radio frequency. I mean, this is, we know how to do this, but you know, the carriers like to say, well, I want my own antennas, and I don't want anyone else in my antennas. But the fact is, technically, and that's all I deal with, technical facts, you could probably put up 1 set of antennas and have everybody go into that 1 set of antennas. I mean, that would be one heck of a system, but technically, there's no reason why it can't be done. Practically, there may be reasons, financially, operationally. You know, they'll say, well, if this guy has to go off because I have to fix my antenna, then they all have to go off. There may be operational reasons, but let's look at how are you justifying this on an operational point of view or a technical point of view? Those are the things we look at also. We haven't seen in the application, and perhaps the answers to the interrogatories by the Siting Council, they may have asked those questions. I can't wait to look. They may have asked those, and we'll get into it there, but it's an excellent question that what can we do, once again, from what they say, and they have the need to demonstrate, they've got the burden of proof to show that they need this.
Dwayne Perkins, City Council. I thought I had a handle on this document until I heard the response to the gentleman's question across the way. Was there an application submitted on May 2006? Was that an application?
No, it was not an application.
Proposal. Okay, but I think my concern will come out the same either way. Basically, in that proposal, several sites were suggested by the city. East Pembroke Road, the prison, City of Danbury Water Tower, over there on Abbey Road, excuse me, Connecticut DOT Garage, Rockwell Road. Then that report seemed to skip to June 10th, 2008, from OptiSite's attorney to the City of Danbury, basically saying that OptiSite rejected the city's recommendations and alternative sites. That letter also talks about a meeting that took place on September 2007, where OptiSite and the mayor's office discussed a revised proposal. Basically, since that proposal is a revision, general statute allows the municipality to come back with additional recommendations and suggestions. I guess my question is what was the actual response by the city to that proposed or revised proposal? If anyone could answer that, maybe the mayor.
I think our response is right here tonight. We're not supporting a cell tower on that location.
May of 2006, the city gave a negative recommendation in regards to the South Park application. Basically, the application is essentially the same application.
So here's my concern. I was just thinking that possibly the city could have been a little bit more proactive. They were interested in Stadley Rough site to begin with. We're 2 years later, and we're still back where we started. No alternative sites were proposed.
There's a different church there now. Right.
Still the same location.
It's the same location, Opposite still has a
Yeah.
30-year lease on
What's that?
They really don't have
No, we're not. Yeah, right. Well, let me explain something to you. We're not going to do work for the cell tower company in the sense of doing their homework. They have the resources to go out and find other places. Our responsibility is to say, there are other options. You go spend your money on engineers, on site assessment, and all the other things. You find the other options. We don't want it here. That's our role to do that. I'm not going to spend engineering money to go look for other sites just because you know, they're going to do that on our nickel and our dime. That doesn't make any sense. It's our responsibility to say that here's a list of suggested areas, which we gave them, which we're going to give them again. And we've, you know, if everybody was here at the beginning of the meeting, you would have heard that we've already have alternate locations that we're not going to disclose right now, but we're going to disclose in the night of the meeting that they ought to go investigate. We're not going to do the investigatory work for them because we have enough to do with our taxpayer dollars and to get into cell tower siting business. We are already have done that. We've already done that subsequently to the 2006 application. They rejected them. We have more areas that probably reject them again. But we're going to make them bring their homework to the siting council after we hit them with it that night and explain why those sites won't work. Well, what did you do? Did you do your assessment? Did you check for coverage? Did it work correctly? How high did you have to go? Have you contacted the property owners? Have you been able to get access to the site? All those things are part of our opposition to the location of this tower at this site, to say that there are alternatives, but you, OptiSite, have not done your homework. You haven't gone out and found other ones, and that's the only argument we want to certainly make to the siting council. I think we've talked a little bit about that earlier on. Okay, other questions? Yes. Sorry, I'll get you on. That's okay.
I just have a quick question. As far as OptiSite's, as far as OptiSite's concerned, have we, on our part, done our homework as far as once they put up a site, and let's just say they decide to improve on that site, and they want to make more changes to that site where it becomes, yeah, it's stealth now, but because we want to improve on it some more, it then starts to look even worse than a 140-foot tower. And then on top of that, what's the history on that? Have they been approved for stuff like that? Are they known to do stuff like that? I mean, have we done our homework on OptiSite as well when it comes to when they want to update their equipment?
Well, I'm certainly familiar with the way OptiSite operates, the way they've worked in the past. And by the way, just for record, they're a relatively responsible company. They're not two guys in a pickup truck trying to, you know, take a lot of cash out of the community. They are a reputable company, but they have one goal in mind, and their goal in mind is to build towers to, you know, be damned. That's how they make their money. For example, in the application, the only sites that they showed as sites they looked at, besides the raw land, you know, they're required to look at existing sites in a 4-mile radius of their proposed sites. The only sites they looked at were ones that are on the Connecticut Siting Council database. Every time the Connecticut Siting Council approves a site, it has to be entered into their database, and you can go to csc.gov and you can, they have a huge spreadsheet of every tower, every place that as long as it's not a building that they don't have control over, that indicates what carrier's on it, how high it is, the whole nonsense. So those are the only ones they listed. They missed, you know, the siting council doesn't know everything, and sometimes they miss sites. For example, they had a site on their site in New Fairfield that doesn't exist. It existed years and years and years ago, and they counted it, but it's not a site. It doesn't exist anymore because they use this database that isn't always right. Whenever an application comes in, and assuming it's approved, it'll be approved for, I'm not saying it's going to be, but let's just say that it's approved for 140-foot monopole to hold T-Mobile's antennas. When the next carrier comes in, let's say Verizon decides that they want to use it, they have to go to the siting council and do the whole process over again. The same situation. Everything begins anew, with the exception that the pole already exists. So they've lost one hurdle of trying to demonstrate the pole. They still have to do the structural analysis of the pole. They have to do the need analysis. They have to do the radio frequency exposure analysis. They have to do all these analyses, and they have to submit what they're doing. And that's where the community gets to be involved again, because, as you said, well, the first one went up where the antennas were close around the pole, and the next one they're going to be out on 12-footers. And that's wait a minute, this isn't what we bought into. We bought into close mount antennas. How dare you do that now? So every applicant stands on its own, but the first one is the toughest, because you've got to demonstrate the true need. That's the toughest hurdle to go through.
Good question, man. Very good question. Other questions? Armin?
Myself, Carol,
Here, Armin.
Ruth, and, oh, I'm sorry. Too much stuff to hold. Myself, Carol, my guys want to stand up, Mike, Harold, where are you? And Ruth are part of a core team that we have gone through the application in great detail, and I suggest you do the same, because there are some flaws in the application itself. And once you get a chance to read through it, you'll better understand what it is that they're trying to put on 52 Stadley Rough Road. And some of the things that we talked about tonight were some of the things that we pointed out, and we are going to be submitting our comments to the city to be included as part of the filing to the Connecticut Siting Council. But you guys, as residents, need to do the same. You need to write the letters, because the more outflow of opinions from residents opposing the cell tower, the better it represents us as a neighborhood. If only 20 people write letters, they're not going to look at it in the same light.
A lot different if 200 people write letters versus 20 people write letters. And we actually had hoped that we would see more people here tonight, but one of the problems has been is getting the word out to all of the neighbors that are going to be affected by the tower.
I got a phone call.
That's good. Yep, and we're and I did too, and yes. And
You also have a website?
yes, we have a website that will give you some information, and if there's any announcements or whatever that you need to be aware of, all you need to do is to actually go to the website, and we've been posting things out there. So we'll read it off to you. It's http://nocelltower.we.bs. B as in boy. It is BS, isn't it? Did you plan that?
It's also listed in the News Times and a couple of the letters.
Yes.
I would highly recommend writing a letter to the editor. I mean, you know, you can do it once every 3 weeks, and you know, I'm on my quota now. I have to wait 2 more weeks.
But let us share with you that we have done a lot of research, and we have put together somewhere in the neighborhood of a 55-page document that is going to be submitted with the city, with the document that they're putting in, so it'll all go into the record. And we have done a lot of research having to do with the property evaluations, all of the things that we found within the proposal that just didn't jive and were things that we felt we needed to talk to in regards to why that shouldn't be going there. And we've done a lot of research in regards to historical locations and things like that. So this document is going to be, actually we're just completing the document. We do have a single appraiser who has written a letter, and we do have a single real estate agent who has written a letter that will go with this. But we need more letters to be written, and we can give you all of the site, you know, the Connecticut Siting Council address and everything is going to be on the website. So if you need, you know, it's already out there. so that you will be able to have the address and everything that you need in order to write your letters to. Now, as we get closer to September 9th, we need to get more advertisement out there. Some of the things that we were thinking of doing was to getting a group of people together to go out and distribute flyers to the neighborhood so that they know when the meeting is, where it's going to be, and what time it's going to be. And they're going to do a mailing. We're also going to be putting some signs out, those that are of legal size, just saying, you know, no cell tower with a meeting date, et cetera, so that everybody has an idea of when it is and et cetera. We also need you to help communicate this. We need you to go to your neighbors. We need to say, did you hear about the meeting on September 9th? We need you to get as many people at that meeting as possible. Historically, it has shown the Connecticut Siting Council, and this has been mentioned by everyone here already tonight, that the more people that show up, the more of a statement we are making that this is not the place that a cell tower should go. So we need your support, and we need you to help communicate this to our neighborhood. And we're not talking just about, you know, the 10 or 20 streets that are just around Stadley Rough. We'd like you to go as far out as you can, and even bring friends and relatives and neighbors who maybe don't even live in the neighborhood to help oppose the site. So that's what we're asking for.
One of the big things is putting a cell tower in our area, as you know, is a heavily densely populated residential area. Sort of sets a precedence. If they can put a cell tower, which doesn't make any sense, and it's ludicrous that we even have to defend this position, but if you put a cell tower at 52 Stadley Rough Road, that just opens the door. So it's really important that everybody show up for the hearing on September 9th. It opens the door for other sites, because once one goes in a residential area, on the research that we did, we couldn't really find a whole lot on cell towers. We did find a lot on high tension lines and how they negatively affect property values, but you couldn't really find too much on cell towers because they really haven't been put in residential areas. But as you know, everyone has cell phones. It's more and more widespread, and it just opens the door for one more thing. And as you mentioned, if they put a 140-foot cell tower up, what's going to prevent them 5 years from now saying, we need 160? Once it's in, you can't get rid of it. So it's really important everybody show up for the meeting. Mike, did you want to say something? He's good. We said it all. Okay, you can have that back.
How about we give these ladies and gentlemen a round of applause for their work that they've done. Good job. Really good job. Thank you very much for all your hard work on this. Mr. Snyders, go ahead.
Just one question for Ron. Mike is going to have to help me on this because we did this on a Saturday morning. He came over with a GP. I'm not into all this, and we found out we're down in wetlands. Now, to get the, you say, 140-foot tower, they're going to have to go up. We figure what, Mike, about 5 or 10 feet with fill. They're going to ruin the wetlands. So now you got a 5 to 10 feet fill. Then on top of that, that's where the cell tower is going. You just say they're going to put a cell tower, and it's going to be 140. It's not going to be 140 feet. It's going to be up higher, and that'll raise it closer to, you know, as they say, it won't fall over. But yet, it'll be closer to falling on property or whatever.
In their application, they do have background information from I'll call it an A&E point of view, where they discuss the location of the tower, and the compound area, the impact on the site, the amount of fill required, to, you know, what has to be trucked in or what has to be trucked out. And it's their contention in this, and this is where I am not I'm an engineer. I'm a radio frequency engineer. This is where more of a civil engineer can review this and make comment on the amount of soil that has to be disturbed. You know, there's going to be a big foundation with this monopole. There's going to be a lot of concrete beneath the ground that you'll never see to hold this thing up.
Now,
So
Ron,
there is a lot of work that has to be
Ron,
looked
just to
at.
dovetail on that, if they're impacting the wetlands, they still have to go through our normal building review process to get their permits. They have the site location, but whether they're permitted to actually begin construction is another, whole nother set of public hearings that, after this. So obviously our first goal is to win this at the Siting Council, but if we can show a negative impact to the wetlands and destruction of the wetlands, and they can't mitigate that, they wouldn't get a permit from the city. So there's a lot of different steps in this, but it was a good point that you brought up there, Mr. Snodgrass.
I was really surprised when I actually went back to the actual site. Mike said this is going to be right where the tower is going to be built. You just can't put anything there. You couldn't even build a shed back there. You've got to build it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the city may not let them build it up. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that happens after this. You know, that'll be up to our Environmental Impact Commission. State Rep Joe Tabersack has something to add, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Boughton, for holding this meeting. I think it was a great idea. I am 100% opposed to the location of this cell tower. I think it's a horrible location for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is what I think it's going to do, in all honesty, to the property values of the folks that live very close to this spot, which is, of course, intertwined with how it's going to destroy the view in the area. But I'm with you on this. I am right now considering whether or not, personally, it makes sense for me to make myself a party to this action. I believe I have a legal basis to do so. I've been served with the application. That's something I'm considering right now, whether or not it makes sense, whether I do have a proper legal basis to do so, and whether there'd be a valid strategy behind it. I don't want to get involved in something if I'm going to duplicate what the city's doing, because I know they're going to work hard on this. But as I consider that, and I may wind up just participating in the public hearing by submitting my own testimony and information, please feel free to contact me to discuss anything. I'm a resource here for you, whether it's to get more information about the Siting Council or to find some Siting Council decisions that might be relative to this application. Let me know. Our firm, the firm that I work for anyway, has handled a few of these applications and been successful in the past. I'm not an expert on opposing cell towers. Steve Smart, one of the partners that I work for, has been successful at it before, and we're meeting this week to discuss this application and you know, what his thoughts are on it. I'm going to be looking for those and willing to share those thoughts with anyone here. So you can reach me. I'm in the phone book, Joe Tabersack. I'm your state representative if you live anywhere near the cell tower, the proposed cell tower. And my email is very simple. You can email me. That's a great way to get me to jtabersack@gmail.com. So it's just J, the letter, my last name, @gmail.com. During the day, I'm at Reefberg, Smart, Donahue, and Nejame. Feel free to call me there at work. I do not get in trouble for it. So thank you all for coming, and if I can help, please call me.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to add, too, for all of our candidates in the room, great piece of legislation in the next session would be to strip this power out of the Connecticut Siting Council, put it back in local control where it belongs. So, and I'm sure everybody agrees with that that's here, and obviously local control in these applications is the way to go. We had no problems with 252, a great plan, it was a Stadley Rough. Stadley Rough, right? Yep. Because we, the Great Plain one, because we handled that here locally, and we didn't have to deal with some folks that don't live in the area, frankly don't care about Danbury, and are going to make a decision that's not necessarily in the best interest of this community. So I know Joe would support that, and I know we've got other candidates, and Mike supports that. I'm sure Dwayne supports that too, if I speak for him. So good piece of legislation to get done. Yes, the other thing is, two things. Can we do a link on the website to the Connecticut Siting Council docket? A hyperlink? I don't know if it's already done. Is it done already? Okay. And there's an online petition thing. We got online petition that we're doing? Because we could even have people sign the petition that don't necessarily live in that direct vicinity. Great. Okay, you can't sign a petition anonymous. It'd be like Boughton's mother. No, you can't do that. So you do got to put your name, address, contact information. Mr. Snodgrass?
Just one quick question. Could, at some time, you let us know who your engineer is, so they could tell us about, what has to be done to the actual site?
Yeah, Ron, would that play into the testimony on September 9th? Is it worth having our folks from the engineering department as well as our environmental folks going out and assess the site? Or is that something, are we kind of putting the cart before the horse there?
When the gentleman asked the question before, I looked at the application because I do remember that. And since I haven't seen the interrogatories, I don't know if the Siting Council asked this. But let me just tell you what they say in here and how I agree that I think something should be done. Hang on one second.
So having said that, I'll unleash the horses out there and we'll do a nice report for the utilities. We'll look at all that, yeah. Yeah, Michael just put that on the list. The environmental impact issues are tremendous, and we have broad latitude, according to the Connecticut General Statutes, on these kinds of building applications, where our commission has been rock solid at not getting overturned in court based on the decisions they have. So it might be good for us to do an initial assessment in anticipation of hopefully not an approval, but at least we'll include that in the record to say, well, they want to look at it here. They're going to have all kinds of problems when they go to EIC anyways. I mean, so we'll get the guys going on that. But Ron,
here's how they've really handled it so lightly. No water flow or water quality changes are anticipated as a result of the construction. A small, isolated wetland area is located to the east and north of the proposed site, with the nearest point of the wetlands approximately 6 feet from the compound. The equipment used will discharge no pollutants to the wetlands or watercourse areas. Then they talk about land. Moderate clearing and minimal grading would be required for the development of the access drive in the site compound. The remaining land to the lessor would remain unchanged by the construction operation of the cell site. Well, they have to clear the compound, the 100 by 100 foot area, then they have to dig a big hole. Because the way these monopoles are supported, it's typically done with a pad footing foundation where a hole will be dug that's probably 8 to 15 feet deep, and a pad will be poured, probably a 3 foot thick pad that's probably 18 by 18, reinforced concrete. And then on top of that will be placed a pier that will run to the grade level, and it'll have bolts in it, and that's what the monopole will be bolted to. So there's a significant amount of soil that's got to be removed, taken off the site. There's more disturbance than they would indicate here. And in their last physical impact, they say that, well, it just is incredible that they say there's no impact on the operation of the land as a result of this. Once again, I'm not a civil engineer, but I mean, I've built enough of these things or been involved in it that I know that there is an impact, and that this is a little shallow as far as the description is concerned. And indeed, you've got some pretty good engineers in Danbury that can maybe counter this and become part of it, saying, this is ridiculous. It's going to, especially with the wetlands issue, 6 feet. I got to tell you, this is like horseshoes. That's almost a ringer.
Because when I first bought my home in Danbury, we were one of the first people in. From Stadley Rough all the way down to Corntassel. At that time, it wasn't complete, but now Corntassel goes all the way through to Hawley Road. One summer, we had a rainstorm. The whole area from Stadley Rough all the way, my whole backyard was flooded. There was flooded beyond that. And I don't know what happened, because there's about 3 or 4 homes in there now, but they weren't there before. That whole area was flooded.
Okay.
They say there's no impact. There's going to be an impact.
We will.
Look at the terrain out there. It goes from Stadley Rough up here, Corntassel down low.
We will do a thorough assessment. Thorough assessment. Yes, ma'am.
Just for the, I don't know what you're calling them, so fabulous four or something, I don't know. No. I'm sorry. The core team, okay, I'm sorry. My name is Cindy, this is my husband, Mike Latimer. We live at 58 Stadley Rough Road. So it's going to be right in our window. And I just have a question as far as when you're going to be doing the assessment as far as home,
We're going to try to work with them, but I think we're going to look at the city's looking at professional.
Okay, to see about the value? Okay. 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 Okay, because we, at one point, we love the area, and we don't want to sell our house or anything. I'm there forever. But we had also considered home improving, rather than selling, home improving, and that's going to even affect, we're going to be putting money into a house that no matter what we do, with a 140-foot tower or more, it's still not going to, we'd never be able to basically improve our home's value.
Ron?
One other thing, when talking about professionals, they will undoubtedly bring a planner. They always bring a planner to a hearing to show why this fits in with the use of the community. And many times the municipality will have their own planner to show the opposite, that it doesn't fit in with the residential use plan of the community, and that there are other areas that would better be suited for this. But they'll always try, because that tries to ameliorate the disruption of land values by having an expert planner talk about how this, and I've done this and I've done that. So typically at these things I'll see two professionals working either for the applicant or the municipality. One's a planner and then one's an evaluator, no offense, not a real estate agent, but someone who actually does property value evaluations for banks or for some issue, who say, in my experience, when I've looked at these, whatever that might be. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that those are two professionals that sometimes, in addition to the engineer, are very helpful in these things.
We had planned on having our city planner at the technical session with you. Good. Great. All that just bolsters that. And we use outside independent appraisers that evaluate property for the city, both residential and commercial. And we'll engage them to begin an assessment and write some kind of report.
Never bring the assessor though, because they're
No,
always trying to.
no, they'll be out there writing up.
Never the assessor.
No, she's going to stay downstairs locked up. We're kind of getting low on time here. I didn't want to torture people past 2 hours, but is there anybody else that just has anything to say or wants to ask any question? Yes, sir.
What about noise from the generators that would be used in case of power failure, and what about the commercial air conditioning units that need to be used to keep the equipment cool?
Okay, question was noise related to any kind of backup power in case of power failure, generators, et cetera, and do these kinds of facilities require some kind of air conditioning unit to keep the equipment cool during the summer?
If T-Mobile is indeed the first carrier, they put their equipment in boxes that look like large refrigerators that are self-contained. They have batteries inside them. There's no external air conditioning or cooling units associated with that. Typically, it'll be 4 cabinets, 2 radio cabinets, a battery cabinet, and a power distribution cabinet. And typically, that's what you see. If Verizon comes in, plan to see a building that's 20 feet by 12 feet by 12 feet that will have a 60,000 watt, 60 kilowatt diesel generator in it. That's Verizon's way. They don't build a site without that. Nextel comes in, If they don't have a generator, they'll have a big plug on the side that should the power go out for an extended, and by the way, this is a federal requirement. Federal regulation requires that all cell sites be battery backed up for 4 hours or 8 hours, and if not for 8 hours, then they have to have the ability to plug a generator into them. So that's a federal requirement. But Verizon, you'll see the big generator with the diesel, you know, and they'll have a, you know, they'll once again, you get these issues then about the diesel tank and where that goes and spills, and especially with wetlands, so you've got some ammunition there. But T-Mobile will just look like 4 refrigerators. Doesn't make a lot of noise, and they'll put pine trees around it, so that's how they'll disguise it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? So let's just recap before we break, just so everybody kind of understands what we got to do. You guys are going to go gin up the neighborhood and get everybody cranked up for September 9th. Our office is going to distribute a letter. We'll do the outcalls for the public hearing portion of the September 9th. We're going to engage some kind of professional to develop some kind of assessment in terms of impact to property values as mentioned. I'm going to turn loose the EIC folks to go over there and do an assessment of the site, look at any kind of environmental impact and the impact on the wetlands that are there to put in there. Ron's going to evaluate the application, all the material on the Connecticut Siting Council and the interrogatories once they come back, which are due back tomorrow. Okay. Mike, did we miss anything? Okay. So in the meantime, we'll also, prior to September 9th, get out a template of some thoughts. We, in the political world, call them talking points. So you all are going to get talking points about some themes that we want you to hit on so that we're all sort of saying the same thing up there, but we're united. So that seem like a plan? All right, well, we're going to get her done. So thanks, Ron, for all your hard work. I appreciate what you do. Yep. One last question. Yes, sir.
Is this meeting going to be in the newspaper?
Oh, yeah, it's a requirement of the Siting Council to publish it in the legal notice section. But we'll also put it up on our city website to let residents know that they're asked to attend. We used Broadview Middle School because we anticipated trying to get as big crowd as possible for this. So that nice brand new auditorium there. So again, thank you for your interest in all this. Thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. All elected officials, thank you folks for being here, and we'll get it done. Thanks. Faster.
Yes. How are you?
Sorry about
Hi.
No problem.
How are you?
We were in the back of your mind. I'm sorry. You're always in my
Yeah, don't mess with me.